What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here?
The band is ducking down in the student section. I mean, just an embarrassment.
Thrown to the end zone, and the ball is on the money. It's caught for a touchdown by David Bell.
You are listening to The Review on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Review. It's the Online Sports Guys college football podcast featuring us, the Online Sports Guys. Right with me again this week, OSG Nelson, me, OSG Phil. Joining us a little bit later in the block will be Brother Wilkie, who has his thoughts on things that went on this past week in college football. And once again, OSG J-Dub is on assignment. We hope to have him back here sometime in the near future because his insight's pretty damn important.
Yes.
Got a lot to talk about this week, John, and not all of it's on the field.
No.
As we record this show, it's been about probably a good 2 hours since word leaked out that Coach Ull will not be with LSU much longer. LSU and Coach Ed Orgeron have come to an agreement that the two will part ways after the 2021 season. Orgeron will not walk away empty-handed, however. He'll get roughly about $17 million to go lounge on the beach or do whatever it is he cares to do.
Yeah.
And LSU, once again, finds themselves looking for a new head coach. What do you think?
I thought it was an inevitability. I'm surprised that it took this long. But, of course, when you see what happened, especially in Lexington, for me, if you combine the Auburn result at home plus the Lexington result on the road, and frankly, after the Lexington,
it'd be Florida though.
But I think that Florida ain't all that, and so you're in a situation where, frankly, after the Lexington game, where it looked like the team was completely and totally disinterested and wanted nothing to do with where they were, that something had to change. And of course, at that point, maybe it was decided at that point that something had to change, and you just had to make sure that all of the agents and the legal representatives were on the same page when it came to just how much it was going to take for both parties to separate. And apparently it's going to be both. The entire buyout is what we're looking at. So yeah, I'm surprised he wasn't Kiffined, but of course, if you're negotiating a buyout of a $42 million contract, then it's going to take some time to figure out what's going on. I just think that, and for those of you that have subscriptions to The Athletic, I would recommend reading the article that was put out to explain where, by all indications, it just seems like Ed Orgeron kind of lost touch with who he was.
Yeah, I was going to get to that because I saw this. I didn't read the article, but I had seen a couple of alerts about it, and there's some mention on Twitter about the fact that somewhere along the line he changed and wasn't the same guy he was a few years ago.
Yeah, and I think that that's part and parcel to all of this as well. And there were some aspects of it that were disappointing, and I'm discussing the article. And it comes to a point to where, much like what we saw with Gene Chizik, it took less than 2 years for everything to fall apart for someone inside the SEC. Yeah, basically. And in 21 months, you go from an individual who is on top of the world, coaching in your home state. You probably could have run for governor at that point and been elected over Governor Edwards, to this point now where you're not held in the highest regard anymore. And it simply was time for the two parties to separate. So not necessarily a surprise for me. The fact that it took as long as it did is the surprise in all of this, and probably the best decision for all parties involved.
Let me ask you this, and I have my own thoughts on it. I'm wondering, do you think that the 2019 winning the championship in 2019, do you think, or 2018, 2019, did that maybe go to his head? I mean,
it appears that way, yeah.
Yeah, with the national title come a lot of outside influences, a lot of different things that aren't normally there for somebody struggling to get themselves over the hump. And it makes you wonder that if all that kind of fed in, and he was one of those people that started believing the hype, basically.
Well, and that may very well be the case. And when you have, when you are on top of the world and you have all of this money for the first time in your career and all of the work and the freedom that you feel that you have with all of that, then once again, the article at The Athletic is required reading when it comes to all of this stuff. And there have been portions of it that have been farmed out on social media. So I would recommend, as a good base of knowledge in all of this, that to me is a good indicator of who Ed Orgeron became and how complex a character Ed Orgeron is. And we saw the end result with the discussion over the weekend that he's going to be separated from LSU.
Yeah, we've talked about over the course of the last really 2 seasons some of the off-the-field issues that they've had down there in Baton Rouge, which really smelled like a lack of control over his players, or there was a lack of respect, or something that wasn't there that should be there in order to have a successful program. And it ended up showing up on the field, because you're talking about a program in LSU that gets the best athletes in Louisiana. And Louisiana is one of the best high school football states in the country.
Yeah.
And they've got enough of a national profile that they can go sit in somebody's living room in Tallahassee, Florida, or Atlanta, Georgia, and at least get a visit from somebody or get some consideration from some of the best players really in the southeastern U.S. And to underperform the way that they have says a lot about there being some sort of a problem there. But the flip side of it is it also puts LSU in somewhat of a similar light to the best team I could equate them to is somewhat of an Auburn, where the job is virtually impossible. You're talking about a program where the expectation is, unless you go 11-1, you're failing and you're probably going to be gone. And it's a tough job, which leads me to my next question and topic of discussion.
Yeah.
Already the cast of characters that you would expect to hear being thrown around for that job.
Yeah.
Headed by C. Franklin, James, head coach at Penn State.
No.
Napier, Billy.
That would be the one that I would look at. Yeah.
And a few other odds and ends, a few other guys who are the perpetual candidates whenever there's a job coming up, including, of course, Luke Fickell, who we'll get to in a little bit.
Sure.
And I forgot, the offensive coordinator for that LSU championship team just a couple of years ago, Joe Brady's name already being bandied about. Brady, the offensive coordinator for the Carolina Panthers in the NFL.
Yeah.
Thinking he might be taking that professional route, but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
Anything about that shock you, or
no? I mean, you're gonna chase after the greatest hits, and you're gonna chase more money after more money. I get that, but the one obviously that would be number one on my list, and the key is whether or not he would be interested in going, is Billy Napier.
Mm-hmm.
Considering that with what he has been able to do at Louisiana, he has said, okay, I need this, and this to help this program get to the next level. The administration, and I mean the administration capital A, not just the athletic department, but the administration has given Billy Napier everything that he has asked for to get the Ragin' Cajuns to the levels that he's looking to get them to. The question for Billy Napier is, do you want the job in Baton Rouge, or do you want to continue to build the program that you're building at the University of Louisiana? That, to me, is the number one issue in trying to bring in a Billy Napier. But, and let's just say that Billy Napier is happy as a builder of a program to get Louisiana to the next level. Then it's going to be the greatest hits package, and it's going to be all those individuals that we constantly hear about. You're trying to drag them from one place to another, and you're trying to get that coach who is a head coach at an institution And that particular coach is trying to think, okay, I need to leave a year early instead of a year late. Which one of those coaches could it be? And would those coaches fit in the Southeastern Conference? We know that James Franklin has from his time at Vanderbilt. Would he come back to the SEC? Is he happy at Penn State? He's probably going to be mentioned for the Southern Cal job. So it's going to be an interesting chase in what direction you go if you're LSU and trying to bring in your new head coach.
Yeah, the other name that interests me in the discussion is apparently, according to Fox Sports' Bruce Feldman, the LSU folks are very interested in Mel Tucker, who's led a virtual renaissance already at Michigan State, but he hasn't even been there a full season yet.
And that's the second season.
Or second season. I'm sorry.
But the thing is, once again, with Mel Tucker, is Mel Tucker happy building with what he's been able to have put in front of him? And you're seeing Mel Tucker right now in year 1.5, finally getting things in the direction that he wants them to go. So is it, would he be even interested in doing something like this, or is he happy building at Michigan State? And that's the same question that we're having with Billy Napier on a Go 5 level, you would be having with Mel Tucker on a Power 5 level.
Yeah, a lot to talk about, and it really, I suspect the conversation is going to escalate to a nuclear level once we get into December and coaching carousel kicks off.
But the other question for me is, now that this decision has been made in Baton Rouge, how excited or motivated are the players going to be in Baton Rouge for the remainder of this season, knowing that there is an end game? That, to me, is the next question in all of this. With what we're seeing from LSU, yeah, you went to Gainesville and you got LSU beats Florida. So LSU beats Florida, great, but you've lost to Auburn at home, not great. You lose to Kentucky in Lexington, not great. And yes, I know you have all the injuries and such that have hamstrung you as well, to a lot of your star players.
At the minimum.
Everybody in the Southeastern Conference goes to a bowl, Phil. You know this. But the thing is, how motivated is this bunch going to be for the remainder of the season? That's the larger question.
Yeah, indeed it is. Moving on to some other issues that came up this weekend. We got to talk about this early again before we get into games, because it was one of the, if not the worst fan behavior at a college football game I think I've ever seen. And that's what happened at Neyland Stadium when the University of Tennessee student section decided they didn't agree with the call made on the field.
With Lane Kiffin being the head coach at Ole Miss.
Basically, the short version is 4th and 24. Tennessee drops back, gets a 23-yard completion. The call on the field, the ball spot on the field, and the replay shows that the play was just a little bit short. And when I say a little bit, I'm talking inches. They don't get the first down. Ole Miss gets the ball, runs out the clock, game over. But that game didn't get over until we had a 20-minute delay because the Tennessee fans decided to throw anything that wasn't attached or in their pockets onto the field, endangering every single person on the field.
There's another bottle that throws. I mean, this is nuts.
Classy. Really classy.
I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I would agree with a lot of people here who have said that the Tennessee fans are arguably the single worst behaved bunch and single worst fan base in college football. And if there was any question about it before, I think this may have pushed them over into that title. There's just no excuse for it.
No, none. And you know what I would love, and I know that this would never happen, but what I would love to do, and we see this in soccer a lot, when governing bodies put their big boy pants on and decide that, they want to enforce things having to do with bad fan behavior, is that you have a stadium that is empty. You play the game, but you don't have fans in the building to prove the lesson of, okay, you guys want to do this? Tell you what, we're going to play the game with insert team here, but none of you can show up. that should make an impact. It'll make an impact financially on the university.
Mm-hmm.
And it will make, you would hope it makes some kind of an emotional impact on the folks who've already paid for their tickets, but don't get to use them because people were stupid. So people have given their money in. They don't get to use their tickets because the student section was a bunch of idiots. Have it in front of have it in empty stadia. Let the opposing fans come in the door. But the home fans, if you're stupid, you don't get to show up in front of empty stands. To me, that would be the best way to do something like this and to stop stupidity like this.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see what both the SEC and Tennessee Chancellor Dante Pittman or what they decide to do, because both of them came out very, very strongly against what happened and basically said there will be repercussions. It's just a matter of what they're going to be.
Empty the building.
Yeah, it could mean anything from a slap on the wrist to what you just said. And I agree with you. At the end of the day, if you're going to try and want to send a message to stop that kind of behavior, you got to take it to a little bit of an opposite extreme.
And
otherwise,
this is literally, this is about as extreme as I can think. And like I said, we see it in soccer, and I'd love to see it in American sports more than what we're seeing now. But you want to put your big boy pants on? You want to make a statement about throwing mustard, like bottles, not just packets, but bottles, and throwing golf balls, and I'd love for folks to call out other folks who are doing this kind of stupidity so you could face the criminal charges that you could be facing. I don't know if that'll happen, but do it in front of empty buildings. That should be your change.
Yeah, the interesting part to me was reading some of the reaction from the Tennessee fans and alumni that were at the game who didn't seem to think that there was a whole lot wrong with what happened.
Just because you buy tickets doesn't mean that you get to do what you want just because you bought a ticket. Just because you've invested in your university in whatever form you have doesn't give you the right to throw things to cause bodily harm to other people.
The excuses ran everything from, but they had players that were laying down and faking injuries and they didn't get called for it. And the referees were against us and they made some bad calls and we had to voice our anger.
So
no,
that's what a voice is for. Voice your anger. Don't throw things. The band had to leave. The cheerleaders had to leave. And the video is out there where you have the cheerleaders with their signboards over their heads as they're leaving the field. This does not happen. This should not happen. And this will not happen if the University of Tennessee and the NCAA, there I went ahead and used those 4 letters, and the conference leaders put their big boy pants on and say, tell you what, we're keeping your money. You don't get to show up.
Yeah, I never thought I would see that fan base do something worse than what they did when they railroaded Greg Schiano.
Yeah,
which should tell you everything you need to know about how stupid they are.
Yep.
But yet they managed to find a way to top it.
Yep.
I don't feel bad that Ole Miss beat them. You deserve everything that's coming to you. I just hope it comes to you. Now,
feel better.
Now that we got all the pontificating about that out of our systems, let me do the quick promo here before we move on to the other stuff, because it's called it's what we call in producer speak a transition.
A transition.
Don't forget, you can find our podcast on video, on audio. We are hosted on Spreaker. You can find us on Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, pretty much any podcasting network you can think of. There's a pretty good chance if you search for OSG Sports, we're going to pop up.
Yep.
If you're watching this, you've found us on YouTube. That's also where all of our social media channels are. Just look up again at OSG Sports. You'll see our smiling faces. And I would be loath to forget John's favorite part of the show, where I get to say, download the phone app. It's free. For those of you watching, he's flashing the phone into the camera. Yes, it's what we do.
Yes.
Please download the app. We would love to let you give you access to all of our content, including Soccer Down Here, our lacrosse content, our various soccer shows, and of course, this show, The Review.
Yes.
Now that I've gotten that out of the way, John, let's talk about some games.
Cool.
Shall we?
Surely.
Pretty interesting week this week, huh?
It had its moments.
We both, I think you and I predicted it. I'm pretty sure Wilkie and J-Dub had mentioned this too. We knew that Iowa was probably going to pull a Big Ten. And by that, I mean lose a game they shouldn't.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you know, it happened this week. They lost to Purdue 24-7. Purdue shredded the Iowa offense. Aiden O'Connell, 30 for 40, 375, and a couple of touchdowns. I knew going into this game, Iowa could not last at a number 2. They were not the second best team in the country, and now we know for a fact they aren't.
I give Purdue all the props in the world because of the tweet that they sent out after the game was over.
Oh, that was epic.
And for those of you that missed it, go look up Purdue's simple. It's a very simple tweet, and sometimes the simplest tweets are the ones that are the best ones. But I will give it away to see if there's any other content perhaps that Purdue has sent out that might be worth something. Where Purdue football tweeted, "We just beat the number 2 out of Iowa." Point for you. You win.
Oh, and you forgot the period at the end of the statement.
Period. Period.
David Bell had a humongous game. Nobody on the Iowa defense could cover that young man. 11 catches for 240 yards and a touchdown.
Sometimes it just ain't your day. And I think it was the first time that a number 2 has lost to an unranked team, I want to say, in over 20 years. So, it's one of those days, and, have a day, have an absolute day, Purdue. Good on you for beating Iowa the way that you did. And we'd always kind of looked at Iowa as a team where defense would carry you and offense would do just enough to continue your winning ways. But that didn't even help you in this particular game. So Purdue gets a big win, and it's one of those wins that, could turn a season around or could continue to accentuate the season that you want to have. But how does Iowa respond? I think that's the biggest question for me. You're the number 2 team in the country. You were. So how do you respond to a loss like this for the remainder of your schedule when a lot of folks were looking at you in the West of being that team that was going to represent the western half of the Big Ten 12-14?
It's a loaded East.
Yeah, and so now what? So now you're looking at a very stacked East against a West that was leaning Iowa to begin with, and now that one's probably put back in the blender. So good luck in trying to figure out how things are going to be in the West to figure out who's going to play in the East in the Big Ten 12-14.
Your prohibitive number 2 team now after this week, the Cincinnati Bearcats, they took care of business. 56-21 win over UCF in a game that really wasn't even that close. The Bearcats jumped out to a 35-7 lead in the first half. Jerome Ford had a huge game, running for 189 yards and 4 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Another solid performance by Luke Fickell's team. They came to play. This was a game that could have potentially been a little bit of a trap game for them.
Mm-hmm.
And they absolutely took care of business. They looked great doing it. It's going to look good on the resume because they put up a big number.
And that's the key in all of these, with making sure that Cincinnati, because they are a Go 5, you're going to have to put those big numbers on the board. Regardless of who you're playing, you're going to have to run up the score a lot. You're going to have to put up big numbers. You're going to have to continue to sit there and say, hey, look at us. So folks don't sit there and say, oh, you're just a group of 5. You're a Go 5 school. You don't get the time of day. You have to be dominant for the remainder of your schedule, regardless of who you're playing.
The team that's going to be coming up right behind them, I think, at this point, the Oklahoma Sooners, I think they might have found them a new quarterback. The much-hyped Spencer Rattler did not get the start. Freshman Caleb Williams did, and Caleb Williams delivered. 18 for 23, 295, 4 touchdown passes.
Yeah.
Dominating performance. Kennedy Brooks ran for 153 yards. The Oklahoma offense looked like the Oklahoma offense of the last 5 or 6 years. They did just enough on defense to keep TCU from winning the game, a 52-31 win, even though Max Duggan threw for 346 and 4 touchdowns for TCU.
Yeah, I mean, it was a solid win, and once again, you're having to put up big numbers, much like we're talking about with Cincinnati, just so you can remain relevant in the conversation when it comes to, if somebody drops and hey, we put up 50 plus, we did this way. You're raising your hand in class, and you're hoping that the teacher notices you when you're asking a question about something that the answer to. It's like right now you look at folks like Oklahoma and Cincinnati, and it reminds you of Arnold Horshack from Welcome Back, Kotter. This is your Google search and your YouTube search for today, kids.
Ooh, Mr. Kotter.
That Mr. Kotter. You're always doing this. Where Georgia right now is Vinny Barbarino. Where everybody else is having to be Arnold Horshack at the moment and try to sit there and raise their hands and talk to Mr. Kotter about this whole thing.
Yeah, I didn't really get into the Georgia game, but that's mostly because they took care of business, handily knocking down Kentucky 30-14. And it was only that close because Kentucky got a late touchdown. Again, the story of that game, the Georgia defense, absolutely dominant. And the mailman himself, Stetson Bennett IV, just keeps on winning games. He makes plays when he has to. He's not putting up gigantic video game numbers, but he's doing what he needs to do to get the win.
Don't have to. I mean, Trent Dilfer won a Super Bowl for the Baltimore Ravens. But, I mean, when you look at, Fear the Firm with Stetson Bennett, we knew. You and I and everyone here knew what he's capable of at quarterback from what we saw when he set state records at Pierce County High School down in Blackshear, Georgia, when he was in high school. We knew the kind of quarterback that he was, so that he is able to do what is asked of him. If he has to light it up, he'll light it up. If he just has to manage, he'll manage. That's what kind of a quarterback you're getting in Stetson Bennett. And right now, why mess with the hot hand? JT Daniels, I know that his notion was to come here and be a starting quarterback and be a star in the SEC. But if Stetson Bennett version 4.0 is giving you the results that you're getting, there should be no reason or rationale to change away from having him as the starting quarterback right now.
And it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the Bulldogs when they line up against Florida in the game that we can't name for what it is. The
world's largest outdoor gathering of folks from 2 states.
Where they celebrate quite a bit.
Yes. Where a lot of property could be destroyed.
That game in 2 weeks down in Jacksonville. We'll talk a little bit more about that on next week's show. Wrapping up the SEC really quick. Alabama 49-9. We don't really need to get into that. They took care of business over Mississippi State.
Once again, Arnold Horshack.
Yeah, nice win for the Auburn Tigers. They go down to Arkansas, or go west to Arkansas, 38-23. A good win over a very good Arkansas Razorbacks team.
I think Arkansas hit a wall, considering what they've had to go through the last handful of weeks.
Their schedule's been monstrous.
Yeah, so they're getting to the bye week just in time, but Auburn caught them at the right time.
Yeah, we already talked about Ole Miss and Tennessee. A good win for the Rebels. Matt Corral, 30 carries, 195 yards. Who would have thought that?
Well, if you're going to take away the running game for Ole Miss, then sometimes Matt Corral's going to have to do things himself. And so, he didn't throw for as many yards as we're used to seeing him do on a weekly basis, but he ran for almost 2 full spins. So not a surprise that you get that coming out of your quarterback, and that's why he's as valuable as he is to Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss right now.
Yeah, big win for Texas A&M. They keep on rolling, 35-14 over largely helpless Missouri team.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit at the beginning about LSU. They took somehow managed to win 49-42. Tyrion Davis-Price, 36 carries, 287 yards, and 3 touchdowns in that game. That was impressive.
Mm-hmm. And, once again, you're looking at and I don't know if it was just, a YOLO effort when it's just like, okay, they score, we'll score, we'll just outscore them. And I think that's what you're looking at with LSU right now. It's just, all right, so fine. You're going to light it up and see what happens, and you're just going to try to make sure that you get one more possession. So if you turn it into arena football and you're the northern version of the New Orleans voodoo, then this is what happens.
And then lastly in the top 25, I want to talk about very briefly Michigan State 20-15 over Indiana. Michigan State goes to 7-0. Indiana did a nice job on defense, just didn't quite have enough on offense. Kenneth Walker, the potential Heisman Trophy candidate for Michigan State, limited to 84 yards. Nice win for the Spartans as they continue their push in the Big Ten. A lot of teams with a week off, so there's not really too much to say about the rest of the ranked teams. Before we go to break, let's toss it over to Brother Wilkie, who could not join us live today while we record this, but he did pre-tape a couple segments talking about Oklahoma, talking about Cincinnati, and talking about life in the Big Ten. Brother Wilkie, take it away.
Hi, guys. Sorry I can't join you this week, but I had some thoughts I wanted to pass along. First of all, Purdue going into Iowa City and beating the number 2 out of number 2 Iowa. I thought that was a clever line I saw on Twitter over the weekend. Look, Purdue went in and did a great job of neutralizing that Iowa defense, which I thought was superb. But they went in with a game plan, and David Bell was rock solid with 240 yards in receiving and a touchdown. Iowa had no answer for David Bell, and so it was a huge win for the Boilermakers over Iowa, and the Hawkeyes are going to drop in the polls, and we'll see how that affects Iowa down the road as far as morale and if they can recover from that. The other thought I had was let's start saying that Michigan State is for real. They went into Bloomington, Indiana, and it was a grinder for the Spartans, and they were able to get off the win 20-15. Kenneth Walker didn't have over 100 yards rushing. In fact, Indiana did a pretty good job keying on him. But Michigan State did just enough to win, and that's kind of the marquee of a Mel Tucker type team. They're physical, and when they get into those grinders like that, they're usually the ones that can come out on top of those type of games. So the Big Ten is really developing interestingly, isn't it? I mean, obviously the East is loaded. Michigan's still playing well. Ohio State, well, they're Ohio State. Now you got Michigan State in the mix. And then now Iowa makes the West very open, although Iowa's a pretty good team, and they can recover from this. But at the same time, you didn't expect them to lose to Purdue and not lose in that regard to Purdue. So the Big Ten has just become very interesting. Okay, my next thought is the Cincinnati Bearcats. They look to rise now to number 2 in the country with Iowa's loss to Purdue. And Cincinnati did what they had to do to stay within the top 4 and get in that playoff bid. They won and won convincingly. They put over 50 points on UCF, which has been the bell cow of the American Conference. And they've got a name. So that helps Cincinnati's cause in maintaining that top 4 status. Now they've got Navy, Tulane. Tulsa will be a tough one. That game, though, at Nippert Stadium in Cincinnati. They go to Tampa against South Florida, and South Florida is struggling. The SMU game on November 20th, that game in Cincinnati, that will be the one you want to mark because SMU now in the AP poll and having a really good year, just nobody knows about it and before they close at East Carolina. So Cincinnati's got to keep winning, and they got to keep putting 50 points up. And if they can do that, I think they can maintain that top 4 ranking. However, it's college football, and there's alliances. And as we get toward the end of the year, and Cincinnati looks to be that team from the group of 5 that may actually make the playoff, what if funny things are going to happen? Who's going to kind of sneak up and force Cincinnati down? They got to put 50 points up from now on to be able to maintain that lofty status. And finally, some thoughts on Oklahoma after their win over TCU on Saturday. Caleb Williams looks like he's going to be the starter from now on after the numbers he put up against the Froggies. So are we ever going to see Spencer Rattler again in an OU uniform even? That makes an interesting angle with the NIL deals, because Spencer Rattler had one of the most lucrative NIL deals out there, and he's now benched. JT Daniels of Georgia also had pretty lucrative NIL deals, and injury has sidelined him, as well as De'Ara King at Miami. But Spencer Rattler, though, is a little more interesting because he was benched for a true freshman who is shining in Lincoln Riley's offense. So right now, it doesn't seem to be an effect on Spencer Rattler's endorsement deals, because he still has a name out there, and the companies that he's been representing seem to be okay with it right now. And you may transfer and move on to another school and still maintain that household name recognition. But it's an interesting thing about the whole NIL deal. The other thing I was thinking, with Oklahoma State's victory, boy, is the Bedlam game going to be huge if serve holds. And I've been around that game all my life, and I can't remember, if this serve holds and both teams are undefeated going into that game, how huge that rivalry will be in the Sooner State. That's a date I'm marking right now, because those Oklahoma and Oklahoma State look to be the class of the Big 12 right now. And I'm looking forward to that clash toward the end of the season. And the Bedlam Brawl being the game that kind of determines its conference championship. But what's interesting is they may meet again in Dallas at the championship game. So kind of an interesting thought. Okay, guys. Appreciate the time.
Appreciate you, brother. Hopefully at some point in time we'll get this worked out schedule-wise where we can get you on live with us at the same time, because we always love to bounce stuff off of you because you've got some great opinions. John, what do you say we take that and we go to break? We've still got a bunch to talk about when we come back in the second half of the show. We'll talk a little bit more about games from Week 7, and we'll take a look ahead at Week 8. All that and more when we return for the second half of the review. You're listening to The Review on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network.
The OSG app is up and running on your Android or iPhone. Install the OSG app and listen to our podcasts from college football, soccer, and lacrosse. What are you waiting for? Download the OSG app today.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinski of Apolinski & Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency, or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Thanks for sticking around, folks. You have made it through the halftime break. We are back for the second half of the show. John, we hit most of the big marquee matchups here for the most part, but before we move on to next week's schedule and a couple of other nuggets, a couple of games that really jumped off the page when we were talking in the break. You mentioned the Pitt Panthers, who moved to 5-1 in the ACC and are looking better every week with Kenny Pickett, the quarterback, who's putting up some serious numbers. He didn't have a per se dominating performance this week in their 28-7 win over Virginia Tech, but he still got the job done. 203 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. Pickett has thrown for 21 TDs and 1 interception for the season. And in the ACC, where everybody's kind of trying to raise their hand and say, pick me, maybe the Pitt Panthers might be that team.
Well, right now they're number 23 in the rankings. And when you're right now at the top of the Coastal, yes, you've only played 2 games and won them both. And you have a game and a half lead on Virginia, who's 3-2, North Carolina 3-3. And so you've got a lot of teams at 500. Pitt is making those early first steps where they've only given up 14 points a game in their first 2 conference games. And I think that also something that you're going to have to look at here is Virginia Tech right now at 3-3, 1-1 in conference. Are each of these games going forward, and really how far back are we going to look, and how much of I'm not going to use the word indictment, but how much of this is evidence about Justin Fuente and the time that he has left in Blacksburg? And I think that that's the early issue for me when you're discussing a team like Virginia Tech. In the Atlantic side of things, you're looking at Wake Forest, who's won their 4 conference games so far. NC State went to Chestnut Hill and knocked off Boston College. I still think that someone is going to lose to BC in Chestnut Hill, but it will be in November. If you're looking for those upset wins in October, not going to happen. I think that the BC is going to bump someone off unexpectedly in Chestnut Hill in November. And so that's what I'm looking at when it comes to the Eagles. So let's look at the schedule oh, great, he says. All right, so here's the schedule in Chestnut Hill, and it's 3 of their final 4 games in Chestnut Hill in November. You've got Virginia Tech, you've got Florida State, and you've got Wake Forest the Saturday after Thanksgiving. So those are your 3 games right now for BC at home in November. That's going to be a fun watch for anybody that likes to see an opposing team get bumped off in a very difficult environment late in the year.
Yeah, I'm seeing the orange light flashing around Wake Forest right now as those words came out of your mouth.
Well, but I mean, look at their
the other 2
schedule. I mean,
teams aren't
legitimately,
really that big of an upset.
Right, but what you could, if you're Boston College, you could be an 8-win Boston College team, because it's Virginia Tech. You come to Atlanta to take on Georgia Tech. Then you've got FSU and Wake in Chestnut Hill. Theoretically, you're at Louisville and you're at Syracuse before the end of the month. So theoretically, you could have an 8-win Boston College team if they run the table in November, which honestly looks like something that they could do.
Another game I want to talk about, because it's our bottom of the barrel featured game of the week.
Go for it.
When UConn, arguably the worst team in college football, Division I college football, this season, at least going into the game, they somehow managed to get a win this week, John.
Yeah, I know.
They are off the schneid. They haven't won in 2 seasons. Believe it or not, they're just that bad, but they won a game. They played Yale.
Well, see, and that's the thing. It's like you're playing a 1AA team. How much does it count?
Yeah, and Yale's not exactly playing.
No, I mean they were 2-2 going in, but they're playing. I think they're playing mainly a conference schedule plus this game and Holy Cross. So, it's they were 2-2 going in. They lose to UConn, but I know that you look at UMass, UConn, and New Mexico State, 1-5, 1-7, and 1-6, and I know that they're all in your bottom of the barrelness. I know that UNLV is a part of that at 0-6 as well. I know that Arizona, who we'll get talking about in just a second, is also at 0-6, and they've only scored 84 points in those 6 games, although they did give somebody a run for their money a couple of weeks ago. But right now, when it looks like bottom of it,
34-0 by Colorado this week.
Yeah, and Colorado, and for them it was their first conference win to improve them to 2-4. So Arizona, they know that there is a deep rebuild there. But honestly, when you're looking at bottom of the barrel, you're looking at Arizona, you're looking at UNLV, you're looking at the 3 independents at the bottom of the table in UMass, UConn, and New Mexico State.
Yeah, and for those of you wondering what we're talking about with the bottom of the barrel, that's part of our weekly college football poll and prediction column here at theonlinesportsguys.com, which
Well
is our
done.
website, and you can
Excellent.
see my various thoughts on random things related to the great, big, wide, wonderful world of sports. Top 12 teams, bottom 5 teams in college football. We rank them. We pick their games. Doing pretty well on predictions, I got to say. Not that I'm
See
patting
now, but
myself on the
no,
back
but I think what you've got to start doing though is that you've got to do one version where you're doing straight up selections and one against the Vegas number when you're doing juice boxes. I think that you've got to do 2 separate lanes of traffic now.
way too much thought involved there.
What we're here for, brother.
We're not asking for, we're not going deep here. We're going for the common man. For those of us who don't necessarily follow such things. Oh, your mention of the worst teams in college football, you forgot J-Dub's school, one of J-Dub's multiple schools.
Oh, well, Kansas, yes, that's my fault.
Kansas.
That's
back
true.
where they belong.
Yes.
So to speak. What do you say we look ahead to next week's schedule, John, as
Go
we
for it.
meander our way through the show?
Right on.
Trying to get to that schedule so I can tell you what games are the good games because I don't have it written down in front of me.
Well, I'll tell you what, I got there faster than you did. Interesting one on Wednesday night. Coastal goes to Boone to take on Appalachian State, 7:30 on the Deuce. So that starts your week. Coastal Carolina at Appalachian State.
I like that matchup. Coastal Carolina's gotten better over the course of the season this year. They're undefeated going into the game.
Yep.
But, man, going up to the mountains and playing App State is not an easy task for anybody.
Nope.
I mean, we're not talking like playing up in Denver, Colorado height at Boone, North Carolina, but it's still App State. Kid Brewer Stadium is a difficult place to play.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious to see what Grayson McCall & Company have in store for them. Excellent matchup Wednesday night on ESPN, the Deuce.
Noon on Saturday. Wake Forest is at Army. That one could be tricky.
Yeah, but is this the same Army team? Yeah, they're 4-2, so they are dangerous. They run an offense that's very hard to defend. I still like Wake Forest in the matchup for the simple reason that Wake is a disciplined basically a senior-laden team with guys who have played for the last couple seasons together. I don't see them getting loose or unhinged playing against Army. I could be wrong there.
Okay, 3:30 kicks. I'll give you 3. Oregon at UCLA, LSU at Ole Miss in the Ed Orgeron Bowl, and Clemson at number 23 Pitt.
Man, those are our best matchups of the week. Yeesh.
Well, no, I'm just going by kickoff time. I'm just going right down the list. I'm just going by kickoff times right now, seeing what you think.
Oh, no. If you go through the list of games, those are probably the best matchups of the weekend. I'm interested, like you said earlier in the show, to see which LSU team shows up. If they want to compete with Ole Miss, they better bring the defense because Ole Miss is going to score some points.
Yeah.
It's going to be a matter of, and LSU under Max Johnson at quarterback has shown the ability to score. They scored a ton of points against Florida this past week. Should be a good matchup. The CBS primetime, CBS 3:30 for them is primetime.
Yes.
So I'm saying primetime game.
Yes, primetime. 7 o'clock kicks. Oh, yeah, go for your Clemson game.
Clemson at Pitt is an interesting matchup in the fact that we talked a little earlier about the teams competing for a potential ACC title berth, and we didn't really mention Clemson.
No, because they're third in their division right now.
How many years has it been since we could say that?
It's been a while.
About a decade?
Yeah.
Be a good test for Pitt to see what they've actually got. Even though Clemson is down this year, they're still somewhat of a bell cow. Something for them to measure, something for the other teams in the ACC to see where they're at.
Yep.
Win for Pitt might put them on their way to playing in Charlotte come early December.
Okay. And now your 7 o'clock. I have 2 at 7 o'clock. Like I said, I'm just going down the grid. I'm not skipping my kickoff times here. Tennessee at Alabama is at 7 o'clock. And we anticipate that Alabama will continue to be angry, and they will truck whoever is in their path between now and December.
Yeah, and just going back to what we mentioned at the beginning of the show about Tennessee's fans, their next home game, November 13th versus Georgia.
Fine, make it an empty building. Only let Georgia fans go in. Don't care.
How crazy would that be?
Make it an empty building. But ban the students, ban whomever. Don't care. No Tennessee fans allowed in the building. You've already paid your money. Fine. The university collects it. Let Georgia people in the building. That's your punishment. 7 o'clock.
Tennessee, Alabama is not an interesting game to me. Alabama will win that one going away.
Yes, and so here's one that's off the beaten path. And I say this, I'm adding this game to the mix simply because this is a game off the beaten path. Number 24, Texas San Antonio, unbeaten so far this season. Rex Castillo, friend of the network, sports director, WRBL TV in Columbus, graduate of UTSA, is a proud Roadrunner.
Hard to find those Roadrunners.
Number 24 in the country. They go to Joe IA Stadium in Ruston, Louisiana to take on Louisiana Tech. So if you want something off the beaten path, look at the number 24 team in the country, Texas San Antonio, as they're on the road at Louisiana Tech. At 7:30, USC is at Notre Dame. So in years past, we all know the royalty that's associated with those two names. That one is on.
A Weimer matchup, but two teams that are not at their best this season, to say the least.
No, and that's, like I said, that's your 7:30 kick. And then once again, we always include these games when we have the opportunity, because we know it can be important to some. By the time we get to this part of the calendar, midnight Eastern, New Mexico State is on the island to take on Hawaii at the Clarence T.C. Ching Athletics Complex.
Go Rainbow Warriors.
Well, there's a reason that we include this one, because it is important to some as the last game of the day.
Literally.
Yes.
That's roughly like a 5 p.m. kickoff in Hawaii for.
Well, it's 5 hours different. So it's a 7 o'clock kick on the Big Island at the Clarence T.C. Ching. But yes,
but they start at 11:59 so they can get it in on the clock on Saturday.
Correct. That is correct. For a reason, for folks who may need to pay attention to this last game on the board.
I'm interested to see what UTSA does. That's a team that I like, teams that aren't expected to be where they are. And the Roadrunners are 7-0 already this season.
Mm-hmm.
They are tied for the conference lead with UTEP.
Mm-hmm.
Both at 3-0. UTEP's lost a game this season. I never thought I would utter those words, yet I have.
Yeah.
The two teams play in a couple weeks. But where are we going to be if UTEP runs the table, or not UTEP runs the table? If UTSA runs the table,
mm-hmm.
Cincinnati runs the table,
mm-hmm.
Coastal runs the table,
mm-hmm.
all things that could potentially happen, and then all of a sudden you got 3 of the Group of 5 teams sitting there undefeated because Cincinnati is looking more and more like they're going to run the table.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that it puts these other two. I don't know that UTSA or Coastal gets into a pick 6 game, though.
No, but I mean, what you're looking at is you're looking at how far up the ladder you can go, and so as you're trying to spin your way up the grid, and this is just through Jerry Palm's predictions right now, and this is courtesy of our friends at CBS Sports. So let's take a peek and see where those other Go Fives could end up. And you're looking at UTEP going to Phoenix to be in that secondary bowl game. They're playing Air Force on the 28th of December, because the Big 12, the Big 10, 12, 14, and the Big 12, 10 don't have enough that would be eligible. So it looks like Jerry Palm has Air Force and UTEP playing in Phoenix. Also on the board, we were looking at, let's see, as I'm scanning here, Coastal and Florida Atlantic playing in Myrtle Beach, which will be a great home game for Coastal Carolina on December the 20th. So good work for them in their initial bowl game. And let's see. So UTSA, they're looking at an interesting one, and Brother Martin might be taking this game in. Jerry Palm has Texas San Antonio playing Houston in Frisco on the 21st.
Weird.
So
the idea of a major college football game in Frisco is just weird to me.
yeah, nothing like playing it on a soccer field, right? So that's what you're looking at with those right now. And this is what Jerry Palm has just recently put out. So that's what you're looking at. So with Cincinnati, and he has Cincinnati playing in the CFP in the Orange Bowl. He has them as the 4 playing Georgia in the Orange Bowl.
A really good bowl game from last year.
Yeah. So that's what we're looking at. He's got Oklahoma and Ohio State as your 2 and your 3 playing in the Cotton Bowl. He's got Georgia and Cincinnati playing in the Orange Bowl, the winners going into the championship. So that's how he has it figured out right now. He's got Alabama as his 5 and Iowa as his 6. Alabama would be playing, and this is under Jerry Palm's predictions, Alabama playing Oklahoma State in the Sugar Bowl, Iowa playing Oregon in the Rose, Notre Dame and Michigan in the Fiesta, NC State and Penn State in the Peach Bowl. So that would be your select committee bowl games from those other 4.
Yeah, just remember too, folks, that we still got a good 5+ weeks left in the college football season.
Right.
And as we all know, where things are today are not probably going to be where they're going to be come the end of November.
Check.
Because it's the one thing you can always predict about college football is some sort of wild and crazy upset is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I want to mention one other thing before we sign off on this episode. Some interesting news floating out of what the hell is the name of the town in Washington? Washington State may be losing their head coach, Nick Rolovich, because he has continued to resist the state mandate to get a vaccine.
Yeah.
And there's talk that he may be done before the season's over.
Well, there is a deadline. I think the deadline was this weekend or somewhere close to this weekend as we're discussing it, that state employees in the state of Washington have to be vaccinated. And that comes from Governor Jay Inslee. And Nick Rolovich, the head coach of Washington State, has said that he, is not interested in being vaccinated. And he has tried to apply for a religious exemption to see if that can keep him in a status that he himself approves of. And the thing that is the interesting element in this for me is that if Coach Rolovich thought that this was the way that he should go, why he did not file a religious exemption a lot sooner than going up against the deadline. He himself does not know what his employment status is. He doesn't know where his status is when it comes to the notion of
the deadline's actually Monday.
Monday. So I knew it was either Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday, 17, 18, or 19 as we're talking. So the issue
4-3 right now after beating Stanford 34-31 this past weekend.
Right, but for me, when Coach Rolovich decides at the 11th hour to try to apply for a religious exemption, if I were genuine in that notion, I would have filed that immediately once all of this stuff had come to the fore. But he waits to the end of the discussion, close to a deadline, to try to file a religious exemption. So we'll see where it goes. With Nick Rolovich is given a religious exemption, if he is allowed to continue to coach at Washington State, or if Governor Jay Inslee, tells Coach Rolo flat out, if you want to keep coaching and you want to continue to be a state employee, you will be vaccinated. So right now, we'll see where it goes. We're right at the deadline, so we'll see what's next in the Palouse.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm reading through here. I did not realize that Rolovich is the single highest paid employee in the state university in the state.
Mm-hmm.
And well, the state university system.
State university system, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some corporate executrons somewhere that are making billions and billions of dollars, but that's a separate conversation.
Right.
And
they are not employees of the state of Washington.
Yes, it's setting up for one hell of a legal battle.
But I mean, legitimately though, if you're a state employee and you agree to be a state employee under the terms of employment,
rules is rules.
That's basically how I imagine the state would present something like this to any court of law when Coach Rolovich signed over to be an employee of the state university system in the state of Washington. These were the guidelines that were set forth. And like I said, for me, if he had a religious concern, I would have done it a lot sooner. Yeah, I mean, legitimately, I would have done it a lot sooner in this discussion instead of sitting there and racing to the end of the pier and going, oh, what about this? To try to add weight to what's going on. So it'll be interesting to see what happens on Monday. And if he makes his early week conference call and press conference as head coach of Washington State University.
Indeed. I think that's pretty much it. We've covered a lot of ground here on this episode, as we have the last few episodes.
Yep.
We're kind of winding through the season. We're past the halfway point. Any thoughts on the Heisman race? What do you think about anybody?
It's so scrambled right now that, I mean, I was watching folks last night who were petitioning that Matt Corral be added to the mix when it comes to what we're seeing. And I know that you're going to get quarterbacks from Alabama that are going to be a part of the discussion. You're going to get Matt Corral to be a part of the discussion. I mean, legitimately, if you look at the rankings,
here's a name for you. They're kind of picking up on this nickname for him too, and that's Godzilla, also known as 6'6", 390-pound nose tackle Jordan Davis of the Georgia Bulldogs.
Well, he probably wins the individual award for defensive players, whether it's the Outland or what have you. He'll probably rack up a lot of awards in the postseason, may not necessarily win it for being a defensive lineman. So we'll see where it goes. But, you know, as we all know, when you're looking at the Heisman, it is a popularity contest. It is pretty much paired to, okay, so who's the shiniest object in the room right now? And so Georgia, you know, you've got a lot of running backs. You know, you have a three-headed monster at running back, so that kind of keeps somebody like Zeus from being Zamir White from being a part of the discussion. Cincinnati, because they're a Go 5, I don't necessarily think that they're a part of the discussion. Oklahoma, it would have been Spencer Rattler if he had continued to be the starting quarterback. I don't quite see that now. Alabama, you've got Bryce Young. He'll probably still be a part of the discussion. Ohio State will probably end up with someone in the discussion. And then you're trying to look at the rest of the pack. And so that's why Matt Corral at number 12 in the country with Ole Miss, if he continues to put up numbers, he probably makes a visit to New York City. I still think it's wide open, and I think that the loss by Alabama to Texas A&M created more of that than anything, because it probably would have been Bryce Young being number one if Alabama stayed undefeated. Now, Bryce Young may have to put up even larger numbers to be still a part of the discussion and getting a visit to New York to possibly get the trophy. That's the interesting part of things. You mentioned how things are going to be. We're only halfway through the season, so you see where we are.
I'm going to try. We need to try pushing Davis for that award. If the kid is the best athlete I have seen for somebody his size, possibly ever.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen him chase down running backs on jet sweeps and things like that. That it's like, how the hell did he do that? I mean, he doesn't have gaudy statistics, but nobody can run in the middle of Georgia's line. And
when you're an aircraft carrier, you can help folks out.
Love to watch the kid play. He plays on the best defense that I think I have seen in the last couple of years in college football. Maybe Alabama from a few years ago when they had all those first-round draft picks might have been a little bit better.
Yeah.
But not by much. Makes for an interesting home stretch here, because that's pretty much where we're at here as we cruise into week 8 this coming week.
Yeah, and you know, it's going to be another couple of weeks, and what this may do and I find this to be interesting, and we'll see if it ends up helping things out, is it maybe what it does is it pushes the deadline for voting back to be more natural than doing it before you get toward the end of the season, before your conference championships and before your bowl games. Maybe this is your catalyst to push the voting back to more of a natural deadline than what we see currently.
Love to see that. Looking forward to seeing what's coming up in the coming week of college football as we inch ever so close to the month of November. And that's when we start hitting some of the serious rivalry games. So much to talk about this season. It's been an adventure. Nobody really knows exactly outside of Georgia who's going to be that team right now. But then again, by the time we have this discussion in 4 weeks, that could all change.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say we wrap it up, John?
Frank Harris for Heisman. Make it so.
We've talked long enough. Thanks for sticking around, everybody. We always appreciate that you're willing to give us an hour or so of your time each week to listen to what our thoughts are on the great, big, wide, wonderful world of college football. For OSG Nelson, I'm OSG Phil, and a special shout out to Brother Wilkie. We are the Online Sports Guys. Thanks for tuning in. We will be back again, hopefully this time next week. Have a great week, everybody. So long.